Evelyn Carter walked slowly toward the lawyer's office that morning, her heart heavy. The world still felt empty without Richard. They had been married for over 40 years, shared every joy, every fight, every moment of life together, and now he was gone. She clutched a small photograph of him in her hand, one that she had carried since the funeral. It gave her strength, but today that strength felt very thin. This was the day everyone had been waiting for, the reading of Richard's will. When she entered the office, the atmosphere felt thick with tension. Her son, Mark, was already there. He didn't look at her with love or even sadness. Instead, he gave her a quick, cold stare. "Sit down, Mom," he said sharply, but there was no warmth in his voice. Evelyn quietly sat in the chair closest to the door, her hands folded in her lap. She felt like a guest, not a wife, not even a mother. As soon as the lawyer, Mr. Jennings, closed the door and began to arrange the papers, Mark suddenly stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You have no right to be here," Mark said, his voice hard, almost shouting. Evelyn's heart dropped. Her lips trembled. "Mark, what are you saying?" "This is about Dad's estate," Mark said, his jaw tight. "He already talked to me about what he wanted. I don't know why you came. This isn't about you." The room went completely silent. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She wanted to scream, to tell him how dare he speak to her like this. She had been there every single day when Richard was sick. She was the one who held his hand when he couldn't sleep, who stayed awake through the nights when his pain was unbearable. She was the one who cooked, cleaned, and prayed for him. But all she did was sit there and take a deep breath. She could not cry here, not in front of Mark, not now. Mr. Jennings cleared his throat, trying to calm the room. "Please," he said firmly, "let's keep this civil. Everyone here has a right to be present." Mark sat down again, crossing his arms, his face red with anger. He looked like a child throwing a silent tantrum, but his silence was louder than any scream. Evelyn glanced around the room. Richard's photograph sat in her lap, and for a moment she felt like he was there, watching over her. She whispered in her heart, "Richard, give me strength. Help me get through this." Her fingers tightened around the picture frame. She remembered Richard's last days, how tired he had looked, how much pain he had endured, yet how softly he had smiled every time she walked into the room. She remembered one night when she sat beside his bed, holding his hand, and he squeezed hers and whispered, "Promise me you'll take care of yourself after I'm gone." She had promised, but she never thought she would have to face this so soon, or that her own son would treat her like a stranger. The lawyer shuffled the papers on his desk, the sound filling the quiet room. Evelyn looked at Mark again. His eyes were fixed on the desk, eager, almost hungry. She suddenly realized what this was about. It wasn't about grief. It wasn't about Richard's memory. It was about money. About the house. About everything Richard had worked so hard to build. Her heart broke again, not just because Richard was gone, but because her son seemed to care more about the inheritance than the man who had left it behind. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked at everyone in the room. "Shall we begin?" he asked. Evelyn nodded slowly. Mark just gave a short, impatient grunt. And then, in that small, quiet room, the lawyer opened the envelope and prepared to read Richard's final words. Evelyn held her breath. Whatever came next would change everything. And deep down, she felt Richard was about to speak to her one last time. Mr. Jennings broke the seal and pulled out a neatly folded document. The paper made a soft crackle in the quiet room. Evelyn held her breath. Mark leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the lawyer's hands like he was waiting to catch a falling coin. "This is the last will and testament of Richard Carter," Mr. Jennings said. "Signed and witnessed 3 months before his passing." Evelyn felt a small shock. 3 months ago, Richard had been very weak. She remembered the week, the oxygen machine, the careful spoonfuls of soup, the way his hands shook when he tried to hold a pen. She had guided his fingers around the handle of his cup. She had never asked about money. She only asked if he wanted more water. The lawyer cleared his throat and began to read. "I give everything I own to the one who stood by me when I could not stand at all, my wife, Evelyn Carter." The words landed like stones in a still pond. First a small splash, then ripples that touched every corner of the room. Evelyn blinked. She was not expecting that. She had come ready to accept a small bite, maybe the house for a while, maybe some savings. But everything? "Richard, you did not have to do this." Mark shot up from his chair so fast it scraped the floor again. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not what he wanted." His voice rose. He told me we would sell the house and invest. He said I'd run things. He said. Mr. Jennings lifted a hand. Please sit, Mark. Let me finish. Mark's jaw worked like he was chewing anger. He did not sit. He planted his hands on the table and leaned forward. Show me the signature. Show me the date. This must be old. There was another will. Dad told me. The lawyer stayed calm. There was a previous will. Your father revoked it with this one. Here is the notarized page, the witnesses, and the timestamp from my office records. He slid a clear folder across the table. The top page showed Richard's shaky, careful signature, and below it, the firm handwriting of 2 witnesses. There was a stamp, a seal, and Mr. Jennings's signature. All proper. All final. Evelyn stared at the signature. She knew the way Richard wrote the R, the way his D always leaned too far. It was his hand, even if weaker. She swallowed a lump in her throat. She did not want to think about money. She wanted to think about the man who had trusted her with his last days. Mark grabbed the folder. He scanned each line like he could burn a hole in it with his eyes. 3 months ago, he said. He could barely hold a pen. He signed with full awareness, Mr. Jennings replied. I verified it. The witnesses verified it. I recorded a short confirmation on file, as I always do. Mark laughed once, sharp and bitter. Of course you did. You lawyers always have something. Evelyn finally spoke, softly. Mark, please. Sit down. Her voice was tired, not angry. She did not want to fight her son. She wanted him to remember his father's smile. She wanted him to remember Sunday mornings, the smell of pancakes, the sound of sports on the TV, the way Richard always saved the last piece of pie for him. Where had that boy gone? Mark did not look at her. His knuckles were white around the folder. So that's it. She gets the house, the savings, the shop shares, everything. His voice cracked on the last word. Mr. Jennings nodded. Yes. All assets pass to Evelyn Carter. There are a few minor bequests to be handled from the estate funds, donations to the clinic that treated him, a scholarship endowment in his name at the local community college. But the core estate goes to Evelyn. The clinic. The scholarship. Evelyn pressed the photo of Richard to her chest. That sounded like him. Even now, he was giving. Mark's shoulders dropped for a moment, like the fight in him had lost air. But then he tightened again. He promised me, he said, quieter but harder. He didn't want the house sitting with memories. He said change is good. He said we'd move fast. Evelyn remembered something else, Richard lying in bed while Mark stood in the doorway, phone in hand, saying he didn't have time to stay long, saying traffic would be bad, saying, we'll sort the house later, Dad. It's just a building. She had pretended not to hear. She had brushed Richard's hair back from his forehead. He had closed his eyes and whispered, it's not just a building. Mr. Jennings continued reading the will, line by line, while Mark paced like a caged runner waiting for the gun. The legal words sounded dry, but their meaning was heavy. Names of accounts. Deeds. The workshop inventory list from the garage Richard loved. The boat he never finished repairing. The garden tools he sharpened every spring. All of it now carried Richard's last choice. When the lawyer reached the end, he paused, then set the main document aside. He reached for a second envelope. It was smaller, sealed by hand, and had a name written on it. To Mark, Mr. Jennings said. Your father left a personal letter. He asked that I give it to you after the will was read. The room shifted again. Even Mark stopped pacing. His eyes locked on the envelope. For a moment, he looked like a little boy waiting to open a birthday card. Evelyn's heart collided with her ribs. A letter. Richard had written to their son. She felt both fear and hope. Maybe Richard had found a way to say what she could never say without breaking. Maybe he had left a bridge behind them instead of a wall. Read it, Mark said, stretching out his hand. Mr. Jennings held the envelope a second longer. It is addressed to you, he said. Your father asked that you read it quietly. He said his words were meant for your ears first. He looked at Evelyn with a gentle nod, as if to ask for patience. Mark snatched the envelope and tore it open. He slid out a single page, written in Richard's uneven script. He stared at the first line. His face changed, confusion, then a flash of hurt, then anger trying to come back and failing. He swallowed. His lips moved, but no sound came out. What does it say? Evelyn whispered. She hated how desperate her voice sounded. She wanted to hear Richard's voice too. She wanted to know how he had chosen these last words for their child. Mark folded the letter quickly, almost hiding it from the air. It says he loved you, he muttered, not meeting her eyes. And that he had his reasons. Mr. Jennings waited, saying nothing. He knew there was more. Evelyn knew there was more. Richard never used half-truths when a full truth was needed. Mark slid the letter back into the envelope with hands that were no longer steady. He pressed the flap down, though it was already torn. He sat, finally, like the weight of the chair was the only thing keeping him from falling. Mr. Jennings stacked the documents, squared the corners, and closed the folder. "We will move forward with the probate steps," he said gently. "There will be paperwork in the coming days. For now, I suggest you all take some time." Time. The word sat in the room like a soft blanket no one wanted to touch. Evelyn stood, holding Richard's photo against her heart. She looked at Mark. He was staring at the table, jaw clenched, eyes bright with something he would not let fall. She wanted to touch his shoulder. She wanted to tell him she was still his mother. But the space between them felt like a river that had flooded its banks. On the way to the door, Mr. Jennings spoke again. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "there is also a short note your husband asked me to share with you, only if you wish. It isn't legal. Just personal." He offered a small, sealed card. Evelyn nodded, too full to speak. She slipped the card into her purse. Outside the window, the sky was pale, like the day had not chosen a color yet. Behind her, Mark's chair creaked. "Mom," he said, voice low. She turned, hope and fear racing each other. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the envelope in his hands. "I need a minute," he said. Evelyn nodded. "Take all the minutes you need." She stepped into the hallway, the door soft against its frame. The air felt cooler there. She pressed her forehead to the wall, closed her eyes, and tried to breathe. Inside, her husband's words had changed everything. Outside, the world was the same. Between those two truths, a mother and a son stood on shaky ground, waiting to see if it would hold. Evelyn waited in the hallway with the small card in her purse and Richard's photo in her hand. Her legs felt unsteady, like she had walked a very long road and found another hill waiting. She could hear nothing from inside the room, just a low hum of traffic outside and the soft buzz of a light. After a minute, the door opened. Mark stepped out. His eyes were red, but dry. He looked at her, then looked away. The envelope with the letter was crushed slightly in his fist. "I'm going to the car," he said, voice flat. "Okay," Evelyn replied softly. "I'll be right behind you." He moved past her and down the hall without another word. Evelyn stood there, still as a statue, and finally took out the small card Mr. Jennings had given her. It was cream-colored, with Richard's careful handwriting on the front, "For Eve." Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a short message, written in lines that leaned a little, the way Richard wrote when he was tired. "Eve, if this reaches you, it means I wasn't strong enough to say everything without breaking. You stood by me when the pain made me unkind, when the nights were long. I changed the will because I needed to give you peace, not more worry. Do not blame the boy. He is ours, even when he is wrong. There is a letter for him. Some truths are hard, but they must be said. If he comes back to you with an honest heart, meet him halfway. That is my last, small wish." "Ah!" Evelyn pressed the card to her chest. She could almost hear his voice in the shape of the words. "He is ours, even when he is wrong." She breathed out slowly and slipped the card back into her purse. The weight in her heart felt the same, but it sat differently now, like a stone she could carry without it cutting her hand. When she reached the parking lot, Mark was already in the driver's seat of his car, staring at the steering wheel. The letter lay open on the passenger seat. He didn't look up. He didn't start the engine. He didn't cry. He just sat there, as if the car were a small boat on a quiet lake with no wind. Evelyn tapped on the window. He unlocked the door. She slid into the passenger seat and kept her hands in her lap. "Do you want to talk?" she asked. He shrugged, then nodded once. "He heard me," Mark said. His voice sounded older than it had an hour ago. "That day in the hallway. I told Ryan we'd sell fast. I said the house felt like a museum. I said keeping it would be a waste." Evelyn remembered the day. She had been in the kitchen, washing Richard's cup. She had heard quick words, a low laugh, the front door closing too soon. She had not asked. She had just wiped the cup and brought it back to the bedroom. Mark picked up the letter with careful fingers and read out loud, halting, as if each line carried a weight. "Mark, you are my son. That is not about papers or promises. It is a choice I made every day since you arrived in our home. I changed my will because I needed to protect your mother. You speak easily about selling a roof that held our wedding songs, your first birthday candles, and the sound of your feet running down the hall. A house can be sold. Love cannot. If you want the house someday, earn it by filling it with kindness. Come to your mother's door not for keys, but for coffee. Fix the loose step, patch the gate, pull the weeds you used to run through. Learn the weight of her grocery bags. I am not punishing you. I am teaching you, the way my father taught me, and the way I wish I had taught you earlier. Some things must be held before they can be given. Mark stopped reading. His voice had broken on the word son. He stared at the page, blinking hard, and then continued in a whisper. There is one more truth. Years ago, when you were 3, we learned that blood does not always match love. It never mattered to me. I chose you then, and I choose you now. Be the man who keeps choosing. Dad. The car went very quiet. Even the world outside felt like it was listening. Evelyn felt her breath catch. The words were simple, but they knocked loose a memory she had sealed away. The day they sat in a small office with a doctor who talked softly about tests and markers and numbers. She remembered how Richard had reached for her hand and said, "We go home the same way we came in, together." They never spoke of it to anyone. Not even to Mark. They decided that love was enough. And it had been, for so many years. Mark stared forward, not at her, not at anything. So he knew, he said. He knew I wasn't, he stopped. His mouth closed around the rest of the sentence like it was a sharp thing. Evelyn turned in her seat to face him. Listen to me, she said, steady and soft. You are my son. You are his son. Nothing in that letter takes that away. Your father is telling you the truth because he wanted your heart to be strong, not weak. Mark swallowed. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never needed proof to be loved, she said. You still don't. He leaned back against the headrest and covered his eyes with his hand. For the first time that day, his shoulders shook. Not anger. Not performance. Just the quiet, honest kind of break that makes room for healing. I was awful, he whispered. I made jokes about selling the house. I didn't stay when he wanted me to stay. I counted minutes instead of memories. Evelyn reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Then count different now. You can start today. He nodded into his palm. When he finally lowered his hand, his eyes were raw but clear. He looked at the letter again. There's a piece I didn't read, he said. He turned the page to show the last small paragraph. If you are reading this, it means courage brought you this far. Let it carry you the rest of the way. Go to your mother. Do one small thing right now, something that shows her you understand. That is the key to everything I left behind. Mark folded the letter carefully, smoothed the crease, and placed it in the glove compartment like something living that needed a safe place. He started the engine, then turned it off again. What do I do first? He asked, almost like a child. Evelyn looked at his hands. They were strong hands, the same hands that used to bring her dandelion bouquets from the yard, the same hands that waved from the school bus window. Drive me home, she said. Then help me take down the winter curtains. Your father always said we should let in more light. Mark managed a small, crooked smile. Okay, he said. We'll let in more light. They pulled out of the parking lot slowly, as if the road itself were new. The sky had chosen its color now, a clear, honest blue. The afternoon lay open before them, filled with small tasks and larger truths. In the quiet between stoplights, the space that had felt like a river began to look like a bridge. And somewhere, inside a remembered laugh, inside a house that held its breath for them, Richard's last lesson waited, ready to be learned. The car ride back home was quiet. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, looking out the window at the streets she had walked with Richard so many times. The houses, the trees, even the cracks in the road looked the same, but nothing felt the same. Beside her, Mark drove slowly, his hands steady on the wheel. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't the same silence from before. It was softer, less heavy, like something had begun to change. When they reached the house, Evelyn felt her throat tighten. The old brick walls stood strong, the windows still reflecting the late afternoon light. Richard had planted the roses along the front path himself. They were blooming now, their red petals open as if welcoming her home. She paused at the door. This was the place Mark had once called a museum. And yet, this was the place that had held their entire life together. Mark carried her bag inside without asking. That small gesture made Evelyn's chest warm. He placed it gently on the table in the hallway, then stood there, looking around the house with new eyes. His gaze lingered on the family photos, his first school picture, Richard holding him in the garden, Evelyn laughing at something off camera. Mark touched one frame lightly, almost as if it might break. "Mom," he said, his voice low, "I was wrong." Evelyn turned to him. His face wasn't red with anger now. It was pale with shame, his eyes tired, but honest. "You gave Dad everything he needed," he continued. "And I gave him excuses. I kept saying I was busy, that I'd come later. I thought there would always be more time." His voice broke. But there wasn't. Evelyn stepped closer and touched his cheek. "You're my son," she whispered. "Your father loved you. He wrote those words because he wanted you to change, not to punish you." Mark nodded, though his eyes were wet. He looked at the floor, then back at her. "I want to do better. Tell me what to do, Mom. I don't want to lose you too." Evelyn's lips trembled into a small smile. "Then start with something simple. Help me with the curtains. Your father always said we should let in more light." Mark gave a faint, crooked smile through his tears. "All right. We'll let in more light." Together, they moved through the house. Evelyn guided him to the living room where the heavy winter curtains still hung, keeping the daylight out. Mark pulled a chair closer, climbed up, and carefully unhooked them while Evelyn folded the fabric neatly in her arms. Dust floated in the air as the sunlight poured in, turning the room golden. For the first time in months, Evelyn felt warmth fill the space, not just from the sun, but from something else, hope. She saw her son working beside her, not for money, not for property, but for family. That was what Richard had wanted all along. After the curtains, they moved on to the garden. Evelyn stood by the roses while Mark picked up the old watering can Richard used. He filled it from the hose, his hands clumsy at first, but steadying as he went. He watered the flowers carefully, as if he understood now that these blooms weren't just plants. They were memories, living reminders of Richard's care. As the sun dipped lower, Evelyn sat on the porch and watched Mark repair the loose step Richard had always complained about. She remembered the words from Richard's letter: fix the step, patch the gate, pull the weeds. Learn the weight of her grocery bags. He was doing it. Piece by piece, he was learning. When Mark finished, he sat beside her on the porch. They didn't speak for a while. They just listened to the sound of the evening crickets and the soft rustle of the wind in the trees. The silence now wasn't empty. It was full of everything they hadn't said before, everything they were starting to rebuild. Finally, Mark spoke. "Mom, do you think he forgave me?" Evelyn looked at him with gentle eyes. "Mark, he never stopped loving you. That was his forgiveness. And now, you have a chance to honor him by living better." Mark nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. "I will. I promise." The sky darkened, stars beginning to appear one by one. Evelyn looked up and imagined Richard there, watching them. She could almost hear his voice, "Let in more light." She felt a peace she hadn't felt in months. Inside the house, the photo of Richard still sat on the table where she had left it. But now, it didn't feel like just a reminder of loss. It felt like a guide, a promise kept, a voice that still spoke. Evelyn reached for her son's hand and held it firmly. For the first time since Richard's passing, she didn't feel alone. The inheritance wasn't just money or a house. It was the lesson Richard had left behind. The lesson that love, loyalty, and family were the only treasures worth keeping. And now, with tears, regret, and a new promise between mother and son, that lesson would live on.